Hi, I'm ESA astronaut Matthias Maurer. I will fly to space in autumn of this year, and I highly appreciate your questions. You had exactly the same questions that I had when I was dreaming to become an astronaut, and I'm very happy now to share what I learned during my training. Well, I'm fully certified to run a spacewalk in both suits, in the American EMU suit, also in the Russian Orlan suit, and I hope there is a chance that I actually can prove that I'm capable of doing a spacewalk. Well, both suits have their advantages and disadvantages. I like, for example, the Russian suit is very simple and robust. So basically you have a door on the back side of the suit, you open the door, you climb in, you close the door, and you can get ready all by yourself. It's very easy and very convenient. In the American suit, you always need help, and it's already tiring to go inside the suit. But then the American suit has a lot of different components, so it can be really tailored to your body, to the length of your arms, the length of your torso and legs. You have more than 50 different gloves that you can choose from. The Russian suit only has 3 different gloves. But surprisingly, these 3 different gloves, they also work perfectly well. And so there are advantages and disadvantages on both combinations, and I think I could work in both suits. Well, there are 50 different gloves because everyone has a little bit different finger lengths, a different hand width. The distance between the finger crotch and the fingertip is very important. And so when we work in space, all we have as utensils, as tools, are our gloves, our hands. And if the gloves are not in a perfect fit, then we have pressure points. Some of the early astronauts lost their fingernails because there was too much pressure in there. I still have some damages here on my fingers because from the last astronaut training, or EMU training, where I had some pressure points here. Also in the Russian suits, I need to put a lot of Band-Aid on my hands because there are pressure points. So every astronaut has these issues because there's only the skin that is perfectly designed to fit your hand. But the gloves always is a kind of a compromise. You need to be able to work with the gloves, but on the other hand, the gloves are it's a device that is made of several layers, so it's stiff, it's hard, and it's never perfect. No, I think I'm in a very unique position. I believe at the moment there's worldwide only one person certified for both suits, and that is currently me. So in the past we had a lot of exchanges. We had NASA astronaut being cross-certified in the Russian Orlan suit. We had Russian cosmonauts being trained also in the EMU suit. But unfortunately in the last 10 years we haven't seen a lot of these cross-certifications, and I hope that I will be the starting point for, again, more cooperation in this respect. Yeah, it's a very good question. It's like the nose, or at least my nose, is always itchy when I'm in the suit. But there's a good thing. In the suit, you need a device to close your nose. I mean, if I dive, I close my nose like this with the fingers. So I need a device in my helmet that does exactly the same. I cannot do it with my fingers because obviously there's the helmet around. So we have a small cushion. It's a device that is called Valsalva. And what it does, it's kind of a soft device that we put inside the helmet, and it does this effect. So it closes my nose. And I need this to adapt to the pressure change. So whenever my nose is runny or like itchy, I just go there and I just rub my nose there. And that helps. Well, space debris is impossible to see. So space debris moves very, very fast. And the solution that we have is we track the bigger objects. All the objects that are 10 centimeters or larger can be tracked from the ground. And if there is such an object close to the ISS, we would deviate. So we would move the ISS out of the way, just to make sure that we don't have a collision. But then there are very small particles, like dust particles, particles only of the size of a few millimeters or even a centimeter. And these particles we cannot see, we cannot measure, and we just can hope that there won't be any impact. Well, the very first time I put my space helmet on and the air wasn't not yet running, I felt like, ooh, this is a very confined environment and it feels like, oh, how do I get out here? But then you very quickly relax and you adapt and you trust, or you learn to trust your spaceship. And a spacesuit is a small spaceship. And so if you would feel claustrophobic after 5 minutes or longer, then I think the job of an astronaut is maybe not the correct one. Well, we fly to space to do lots of experiments, lots of science. And these experiments that I will be performing in space, scientists have developed for more than like 5 years, 10 years. For some scientists, it's even like the most important experiment of their career. So my goal is all the experiments that make it up to space and that I will like work with. I want to do the best just to make sure that all the science's objectives are reached and that all the people who worked hard for this goal, that they will not be disappointed because I make an error. So that is the biggest point for me. The second point for me is I want to share all the emotions and everything that I'm able to live on the space station. I want to share it with everyone who's interested in following me. It's because a lot of people dream to become an astronaut, but unfortunately not so many people can fly to space. So that is the big objective that I gave to myself. Bring people along, at least emotionally. Well, I don't think any human being would be fearless, but I learned to trust. I learned to trust my crew. I learned to trust my engineers, my trainers. And I think when I fly to space, I will not be the first person. I will not be Yuri Gagarin, who was most probably a fearless person because he did something that nobody else has done ever before. When I fly to space, I will be probably number 600 who flies to space. And so we have a good knowledge base. We know how a rocket works. We know how a space station works. And so I trust everyone around. But obviously, on the day of the launch, I will also be nervous. And whenever the rocket fires up the engines and I feel all that thrust in my body, then I think my heart will also jump a bit. Well, I want to leave Earth to return. Sounds a bit stupid because maybe you shouldn't then leave, but I want to go to this place to have this unique position, to have a look on our planet that only very few people have been able to see. It's like when you see a mountain and think like, I want to climb this mountain just to look down, just to have a different perspective. Because having a different perspective shows you usually a lot of new information. It gives you a lot of reward because you conquered a challenge and you learn a lot about your environment, you learn a lot about your team, you learn a lot about yourself. But when I fly to space, it's because of the science and all the remaining part, like this unique experience and to fly to space and have this unique viewpoint, that is something of an additional advantage for me. I think I actually started late in advance. You need to learn a lot of stuff before you fly to space. The first thing you need to learn is like how does your rocket work, or the capsule that brings you to space. In my case, it's a new capsule, so it's a SpaceX Dragon capsule, which luckily is almost fully automated, so I don't need to learn as much as my colleagues learned to fly in the Soyuz. The second part, and that's the most intensive part that we need to study, is the space station. The space station itself actually is a huge station, or actually 2 stations, that consist of components from a lot of different countries. And all this stuff was developed by different people. So every machine is different. And to learn how everything works in a nominal state is already a lot of time. But then you also need to be able to repair it. And if there is an emergency situation, you also need to learn how to remain calm and to work as a team and to fix the station and to always be protected. The biggest challenge in training, I believe, was Russian language training, because Russian is a very difficult language to learn. It takes a lot of time, but it also combines with other challenges like the spacewalk training. It's physically very demanding, but also mentally very demanding training. And the hardest challenge that I have faced so far was just the last 4 weeks when I had my Orlan spacesuit training. I had to be in a spacesuit underwater, doing hard work, physically challenging, always fully concentrated to make sure that I don't get lost in space by following the safety protocol, and all this in Russian language. So that was the toughest part of my training. Well, I haven't been to space yet, but I was told that around 70% of all the astronauts experience space motion sickness. So that might be that you just feel slightly unwell, or it might be that you really are sick and that you have to throw up, like what people do when they are on a boat and the boat moves a lot, or when you're in a car as a children, maybe you were car sick or motion sick. So I expect that I will most probably also feel unwell in the first 3 days when I arrive on the space station. But that's expected. We are prepared for that. We have medication. Apart from that, I just hope that I will not be sick in space, even if we are trained. So there are always medical problems that can arise. You can have like a tooth that hurts, or you can have an injury because some of the dust gets in your eyes, or you inhale some of the dust and you have irritated lungs. So all that stuff can happen in space, but we are prepared for it. Well, I will perform a lot of experiments, roughly 35 European experiments, but adding also the Japanese experiments, Canadian experiments, and American experiments, I will be probably between 100 and 150 experiments. And these experiments span across a wide range of scientific topics. It's from material science, that's what I studied, so developing new materials for new applications and just making or using space or the absence of gravity to develop new materials, but also having medical experiments to learn more about the human body, but also having like a wide range of other experiments to prove new technology for spaceflight, or experiments in the domain of physics, chemistry, combustion, for example, how flames propagate in space, and so on. So a wide range. What we do is like we train skills. It's like when you want to become, for example, a car mechanic, you don't train to repair every single car. So people usually understand if you know how to repair like one car, let's say a Volkswagen, you should also be a good mechanic that can fix a BMW. So it's the same for us. We learn the skills, and as soon as we know how to run a certain type of experiments, the trainers assume that we also can like run experiments that are similar to these ones. There are experiments which are really complicated, and these ones we train fully, every single step. But then there are experiments which are really easy to implement. For example, just a small CubeSat experiment that I just need to activate. So there I just have like a one-pager that tells me exactly step by step what I need to do. And so these experiments we even don't train at all. So when I was a kid, I looked into the sky and I saw all the fighter jets flying at a very low level, and I wanted to become a pilot. Later on, I changed my mind, and I thought like I want to become an engineer, aerospace engineer. And my parents always told me that I had a lot of ideas, and I certainly had some inventor syndrome, or inventor genes in myself, I should say. And that's actually what I like very much, to invent new stuff, to ask myself questions and to find solutions to it. And so becoming an astronaut actually combines all these interests. I can fly, and I can work with a lot of very interesting top-notch science and engineering material, and I also can work with international teams, and I can hopefully contribute and find new solutions. I hope that I adapt very quickly to microgravity. Hopefully it will be straight after launch. I'm fully adapted, but I think the reality will be different. So probably it's 3 days. That's what most astronauts tell, that you need to get fully adapted. So after 3 days, I hope I will not have any longer space motion sickness syndromes, but then my body will continue to adapt. My body will learn that in zero gravity, I don't need that many muscles, I don't need that many or that strong bones. So my body will immediately start to get rid of bones and muscles. And I need to do sports, and there will be a certain moment in time when there is an equilibrium, when I can maintain my strength, my muscles and my bones, while at the same time the body accepts that, okay, I'm in zero gravity, but he's doing sports, and that's a constant level then. Well, I enjoy the sports, but I also enjoy not doing sports and resting, reading a book, watching a film, just being with my friends. So 2 hours of sports every day is probably more than what I would do normally on the ground, or if I wasn't an astronaut. I think 2 or 3 times a week I would anyway do sports. But yes, sometimes it's also I need to convince myself to do the sport. So in space we don't have a shower and we don't have a washing machine. So this already answers 2 of the questions. So we don't wash our clothes, we just use them like for as long as we can use them, which means like my underwear is good for 3 days. My t-shirt is good for a week, and the next week I use that t-shirt from last week for doing sports, so it will become a smelly t-shirt. And then all that stuff, when it is used, we just pack it up and put it in an old capsule, and that capsule will re-enter the atmosphere and just burn up. For the 6 months in space, I have exactly 6 pair of pants, so which means like 1 pair of trousers per month. For washing, how to clean myself. So we have towels, and these towels we can like wet them. We add a little bit of water. I have roughly 1/4 liter of water per day that I can use to wash myself. And so it'll be like in the old days when you're hiking, you have a little bit of water and you rub yourself, and everyone does it, everyone smells a bit, and you're fine. So everything that you want to have falling down into the toilet in space actually only falls if you force it to fall down there. And so the toilet in space is different to a toilet on the ground. We basically have a vacuum cleaner connected to the toilet, and so there's a lot of wind that pulls down the toilet, and when you're floating on top of the toilet and you do your stuff, and it gets then pulled by the wind, by the airstream into the toilet. And that's the only difference. The rest is more or less the same. Well, definitely I want to bring some memories like up to space, so I brought some photos of my family, and I also brought some small stuff that is important to my best friends and also to me, like small souvenirs which are very individual. Most definitely yes, and that happens to all of us, and well, in this case the best thing is like just admit that you did something which wasn't supposed to be done, because otherwise people on the ground will have problems fixing the problem, or you might actually ruin an experiment. And so just call down the ground, Houston, we got a small problem, and I did this and that, and then we fix it. In my spare time, I think I will spend a lot of time just looking down at the beauty of our planet, most probably also with a camera in my hand, and just trying to take all these moments that I will then remember and share with the people on the ground. Apparently the smell on board of the station isn't as bad as people believe. It's a huge station, but it has a lot of like air cleaning devices in there. So the smelly part is actually the small capsule. When people arrive on the station in the Soyuz capsule and they open the hatch and get in, then the astronauts on board of the station believe like, oh, they really stink. But okay, that's it. You get very quickly used to the smell in space. Well, we bring up air, that's one part of it, but all the oxygen that we breathe, we need to replenish. And that we do by bringing up water. And water is actually oxygen and hydrogen. So we do split this water into oxygen and hydrogen. And the oxygen we breathe, and the hydrogen we just expel overboard. I think the good food is what I will miss most from our planet, because in space we have good food, but we don't have certain types of food. So I cannot make a barbecue. I cannot bake stuff. I cannot have a crusty, like a crunchy pizza, or like a nice bread that is really crunchy and has a good feeling. The reason is, like all the food in space, when we eat it, it shall not create small crumbs, because the crumbs wouldn't fall down to the ground. They would just float. And when we breathe, we can actually breathe in all these small particles, and that's a problem for the eyes and for the respiration. So all the food that we have needs to be kind of soggy and just being gluing together. I have no idea. It'll be a surprise, and it's not that important, because it's just one meal on the way to space, and I think I will be very focused on my launch on that day. So our crew has also chosen a zero-G indicator. It will be a soft toy animal, but I cannot tell yet exactly what it is, because it's a secret that we only reveal on the day of the launch. Actually, that's what my colleagues reported. You hear a lot of engine firing. Like during the launch, the rocket is quite far away at the beginning, so you don't hear a lot. But then the rocket gets shorter and shorter, because all the consumed stages are being dropped off. And at the very end, it's like your capsule actually fires and does all the correction of the orbits. And so you hear constant firing of the jet engines. And it's not a one burn, it's like bang, 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 bang. So it's continuously firing and a lot of noise. And the first astronauts in the SpaceX Dragon were actually very surprised. Well, I had a lot of tips from my colleagues who flew in the very first Dragon mission and the Crew 1. They just landed, they gave a lot of debriefings. Thomas just sent me some information on the global mission and said, like, don't worry, it's like life in space is so much easier than the training. You'll be fine. Well, Europe is a very strong partner with NASA in the Artemis program. So we actually already know that there will be Europeans flying on this huge rocket towards the moon. The very first astronauts will not land on the moon. They will just fly to the new station that will be floating around the moon. But I'm pretty sure before this decade is over, so by 2030, we will see the very first European also walking on the surface of the moon. The rise of commercial spaceflight is a kind of an issue that I think is good and bad. The good part is, like, we will have more people in space, and so we'll have like more technology developed for it. All this technology will be more robust, and it will be way more efficient than in the past. We will come now to recycling rockets, reuse of rockets. That was never done before in the past. And at the beginning, when we compare spaceflight with flying in planes, with the beginning of commercial airplanes or commercial travel through the air, the offer was hugely expanded, technology improved, and so it was for the benefit of all, except the benefit of nature. Like, the more people travel to space, the more garbage will be in space, the more space debris we produce. So we need to be very attentive that by conquering space, we leave clean space behind so that the access to space is also possible for the generations after us. Well, I think my generation will not fly to Mars. It's the young people who are about to be born, or maybe they are now in school, that will be the astronauts of the next generation that will fly to Mars. And I have a very deep respect for them, because traveling to Mars, it's so much more difficult than traveling to the ISS or the Moon. The ISS is 400 kilometers away. The Moon is 400,000 kilometers away. And Mars, it's so far away, it depends on the constellation where Earth and Mars currently are. But it's so far away that just talking with the ground may take up to 20 minutes. So when I have a question, I'm on the surface of Mars, and I ask this question to Houston, say like, do I pick up this stone or that stone? It may take up to 20 minutes before they only hear it on the ground. And then they discuss it, and they send me back an answer. And this answer again takes 20 minutes. So that means like 45 minutes more or less between my question and the answer. And you already see that in such a constellation, being on Mars, you need to be autonomous. You need to be fully resilient as an astronaut team, because the ground can only, like with a large delay in time, help you. So it will be much, much harder for the astronauts. And please keep on going, asking these questions. I like that.